Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
A local lawmaker is trying to roll back parts of California's immigration sanctuary law. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. A new bill was announced today in front of the county administration building. The author says it's a response to San Diego County's own sanctuary policy. KPBS video journalist Matthew Bowler reports the announcement drew protesters.
On one side of the issue,
families should not be separated by opportunistic politicians.
On the other,
even though this bill passed, SB 54 was wrong then, and it's wrong today.
Both sides of the immigration debate made their case for and against SB 54, known as the California Values Act. State Senator Brian Jones has introduced a bill to counter the 2017 law. Jones says his bill, SB 554, does two things.
Number one, it prohibits local jurisdictions from further restricting cooperation with immigration officials beyond what current sanctuary law allows. Number two, it mandates cooperation for specific violent crimes that are convicted.
In December, San Diego County passed a policy to stop county agencies from cooperating with or assisting ICE unless they have an arrest warrant signed by a state or federal judicial official.
In 2017, California established SB 54, which stated that local law enforcement and state authorities, in only limited capacity should they collaborate for the purpose of enforcing immigration law.
And yet this bill exploits them to allow murderers, rapists, child molesters into our community, and there's absolutely no excuse for it.
Christian Ramirez from SEIU United Service Workers West says those statements are anti-immigrant and anti-worker.
In this city, we will not allow the far extremist positions of politicians to attack the very people that make this economy work. Con estas manos.
And El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells fires back in support of the bill.
What is wrong with you? Why are you so connected to your political ideology that you could care less about what happens to the innocent of our state, our government, and our local cities?
SB 554 was just introduced and still needs to be assigned to a Senate committee for a hearing. Matthew Bowler, KPBS News.
Chaos, uncertainty, and in some cases fear. Emotions are running high through the federal government as thousands of former workers reel from recent job losses. Many more are waiting to see if they're next on the chopping block. Laura Aguirre reports on the Trump administration's efforts to upend the federal workforce.
In recent days, thousands more federal workers have been fired from roles at multiple agencies, including the Department of Energy, Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Forest Service. Also, the CDC, where officials say the exact number of job cuts is unknown.
Managers found out that team members had been fired because they emailed them and got a bounce back saying the email address no longer exists.
A source tells CNN the IRS is expected to lose around 6,000 employees this week in the thick of tax season. Proposed job cuts that could impact around 50,000 civilian employees at the Defense Department put on hold this morning, pending a more thorough review of what those cuts could mean for U.S. military readiness, say two defense officials familiar with the matter.
I don't support the process Doge and Elon Musk are employing, which is a wrecking ball.
Or perhaps a chainsaw, like the one Elon Musk ceremoniously wielded on stage at the Conservative Political Action Conference Thursday night. Constituents of Georgia Republican Congressman Rich McCormick not holding back at a town hall in Roswell last night.
Why is this being jammed down the pipe so rushed and sloppily?
Use a scalpel. My understanding is when you say you have this many employees that you have to cut, that organization decides who they're going to cut. Now, they may.
There's rising concern that this is kind of mindless and reckless. There's no pattern to it. There's no rhyme or reason to it, and it's going to hurt average American families, especially in their constituencies.
I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
President Trump is reportedly considering a plan to move the U.S. Postal Service towards privatization. The Washington Post reports that Trump plans to disband the Postal Regulatory Commission. That's the independent board that oversees the USPS. The report says he would put the agency under direct control of the Commerce Department. Neither the White House or the Postal Service have commented, but a White House official denied Trump plans to sign such an order. It's unlikely the president would be able to privatize the USPS without congressional approval. In northern Imperial County, the tiny town of Niland is still fighting to get its post office rebuilt. KPBS Imperial Valley reporter Corey Suzuki says residents there have been cut off from daily access to the mail for more than 3 years now.
Since February 2022, Niland resident Juanita Wolford has been paying for a P.O. box that no longer exists.
I guess I'm paying to get my mail, you know, when the mail's supposed to be free anyway. But I pay $84 a year for the P.O. box that we don't have anymore.
In 2022, Niland's post office was destroyed in a fire, cutting off daily service for several small, poorer communities on the north end of the Imperial Valley. The Postal Service promised to reopen it as quickly as possible. During the past 3 years, U.S. senators have urged the Postmaster General to act. Niland community leaders have held protests. County officials have offered to donate buildings to help. But the Niland Post Office is still closed.
It really cut out a lot, even including for the people in Niland. You know, there was other little towns that had P.O. boxes here, too, so it devastated a lot of people.
In a statement last week, Postal Service officials said they're trying to fill the gap with a temporary mail truck that visits the town for pickups on weekdays. But still no word on when the post office will reopen. In Niland, Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
The woman who opened fire at an elementary school across the street from her home in San Carlos was denied parole today. It's been nearly 5 decades since Brenda Spencer opened fire, killing 2 adults and injuring 8 students and a police officer at Cleveland Elementary School. Spencer was 16 at the time of the shooting. When asked why she did it, she said she didn't like Mondays. A local historian wanted to know what it was like to be black and queer in San Diego 40 years ago. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson says in the process, he found a hero.
That one's great. I'll leave that one here. But
when TJ Talley began exploring the Lambda archives in the fall, he pulled boxes from the late 80s and early 90s. One person burst through the piles of papers and photographs and video.
So Marty Mackey is a Spitfire, a tiny person, barely over 5 feet, big glasses.
Marty arrived in San Diego in 1988 at 38 years old. The story goes that her car broke down and she decided to stay for a little bit. Then she fell in love with the city and with Phyllis Jackson.
Phyllis was a dedicated mother and a brilliant activist herself, also a black lesbian, and so they became quite a team.
By later that year, Marty was writing for a local gay and lesbian publication.
And Marty quickly becomes one of the most popular and controversial writers.
She called herself a member of the Anti-Fluff Brigade. She thought the U.S., San Diego especially, loved to highlight the positive, but glossed over all the work left to do. She wrote what sound like proverbs. Quote, keeping your mouth shut only makes you run your tongue around the bad taste inside. She wrote about the Gulf War. Quote, we fill our gas tanks with the blood of the children who were slaughtered over there and laugh because the price is so low. About the LA riots, I can forgive you only if your foot finally is released from my throat. People called her a troublemaker. She wrote, I mean, if you're stepping on my foot and I tell you to get off, should I be called a troublemaker for not letting you stand on my foot? The archives are filled with hate mail to Marty and her comebacks.
In response to a 3-paragraph letter that was deeply white supremacist and said that black people had no intellectual ability and had no business writing, she just simply wrote, I give it a D. It's got a beat, but you can't dance to it. And I lived. When I saw that, I screamed.
Marty also founded a group called Lagadu,
which stands for Lesbians and Gays of African Descent United, and it just sounds fun, Lagadu.
Talley says it was the first formal organization of its kind locally.
Not only did Lagadu create a space for Black LGBTQ San Diegans to say, oh my God, I'm both of these things, right? But it also really took up space in Pride and in Hillcrest in general.
Lagadu ran a sober cafe at the Pride Parade, connected people to resources for HIV, AIDS, and drug addiction, held what they called rap sessions for Black LGBT San Diegans to talk.
And they're like, look, it's been hard here. How do I navigate racism at the bars? How do I navigate employment?
2 of their members marshaled the 1990 Pride Parade, and Marty put on a show about Black LGBT life at the Lyceum Theater downtown. Big moments of visibility for a tiny demographic in San Diego. In 1991, Pride named her Woman of the Year.
It is shocking to think that in 4 years she could do all that.
Just 4 years after arriving, in August 1992, Marty's weekly column disappears from the Lambda archives. Fundraisers for her medical bills began appearing in October. In December, obituaries. She died of cancer at 42.
One of the things that's hardest about being a historian in the archives is that you get very invested in your materials and you get very invested in the people you read about. And there is this moment when you keep following and you accidentally move a month ahead and then there's nothing. And you have to go back and someone that you have grown to care about is no longer there. I came here to do, an investigative historical thought about what it meant to be Black and queer in San Diego. And I found a hero. What is wild about that is that Marty would be wildly uninterested in any of this, right? She would look at me and be like, all right, so what are you doing? I should just be like adjusting her glasses and be like, so what are you doing? Is it better? Oh, we got phones now. We got phones now that do all that? Fix poverty? Did it fix the AIDS? No? Still got wars? They still racist out here? And I think that then she'd be like, okay, well then stop praising me and go get to it.
Talley says Marty's words still resonate.
There is something deeply reassuring and also so horrifying that most of the things that she wrote about are unchanged.
He says the renewed push for social justice in 2020 gave hope that
we could talk about stuff and people would listen. But I think in the last 5 years, we may have gotten a little fatigued.
He says with the inauguration of President Donald Trump, people may feel that era is over.
And I think Marty would say, oh, so people listened for a minute and then they got tired. Work is still the same.
As the new administration recognizes only 2 genders, bans trans people from serving in the military, and ends federal diversity initiatives, Talley leans on Marty.
I am overwhelmed that I am just one person and I am deeply flawed. But so is Marty Mackey, and maybe that gives me hope.
When the digital archive opens to the public in April, Talley hopes it will make others feel less alone, too. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
San Diego is preparing to lower speed limits on a handful of commercial streets. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says it's part of a larger plan to manage speeds and improve traffic safety.
Among the streets that would see new 20 miles per hour speed limits are segments of 30th Street in North Park and Newport Avenue in Ocean Beach. 3.5 years ago, the state legislature gave cities slightly more autonomy when setting speed limits, which are typically based on the actual speeds people drive, not what's safe. A council committee voted Thursday to advance the slower speed limits to the full city council.
This is an important step to making San Diego's streets safer. The passage of Assembly Bill 43 gives the city greater flexibility to lower speed limits based on safety. And residents in my district have consistently called for slower traffic and safer speeds.
The state law includes strict criteria for when cities can lower speed limits in so-called business activity districts. Few streets in San Diego actually meet those criteria, and if they do, it's only for a few blocks. Several street safety activists also told the committee speed limit signs alone do little to slow drivers down.
We need tangible infrastructure changes. Narrow lanes, speed humps, roundabout, raised crosswalks. and protected bike lanes that physically enforce safer speeds.
City staff say they're working on a comprehensive speed management plan that could lower speed limits on even more streets. It's expected to reach the full city council 1 year from now. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Today is National Caregivers Day. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says more than 37 million people in the U.S. provide unpaid elder care for a loved one. It's a job that can take a toll on the caregiver, emotionally, physically, and financially. Mandy Gaither explains how to offer them support to avoid burnout.
It's a job that can be rewarding, but being a caregiver can also feel exhausting and overwhelming.
To take care of their own needs has to be seen as a necessity, not as some guilty indulgence.
Psychologist Taylor Rush with Cleveland Clinic says many times caregivers she works with in her practice feel like they don't have time to focus on themselves, but it's critical to avoid burnout.
You feel less stressed, more energized, or have a better balanced view of life. You're more likely going to be patient with your loved one, attend to their needs better.
Rush says to start with self-care. Caregivers should exercise, prioritize sleep, eat a healthy diet, and engage with others. Those wanting to offer support can help assume care for a short time to allow the caregiver to take a short break,
so that they can address their own needs and responsibilities with peace of mind that their loved one is okay at home.
Other ways to support a caregiver: give the gift of service. Rush says whether it's offering to help with small projects around the loved one's house, finding community assistance programs like transportation services, or lending a hand to get them organized, no amount of aid is too small.
It can make such a big impact in knowing that they're cared about and that their health is being valued as well, which can go an incredibly long way.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
A Northern California water agency is partnering with the Scripps Institute of Oceanography to collect data on atmospheric rivers through weather balloons. Now, part of that research also includes heavy-duty hurricane aircraft. Kayla Mueller has the story.
A partnership spanning across several agencies: Yuba Water, the Department of Water Resources, the U.S. Air Force, and Scripps Institute of Oceanography is working to better understand atmospheric rivers.
The one thing with California is that it's really the land of extremes. It's either feast or famine. The variability from year to year in terms of the amount of precipitation that falls is the most variable compared to anywhere else in the United States.
Too many or too few atmospheric rivers can be a determining factor of flood or drought. So researchers are learning more about them to help with the forecasts and optimize water management.
This place is a very good location for us to, one, the proximity of the atmospheric rivers for us, and to just how the weather is here. We can easily come in and come out.
Atmospheric river research flights are typically done from January through March. Teams are flying out from Mather Air Base to the Pacific Ocean.
Because the Pacific Ocean is very data sparse, and these are really the best way to go out and observe these storms. And if these forecast models don't know what's going on over the Pacific Ocean, they're not going to forecast them well as they're making landfall over California.
During a typical mission, there are about 25 dropsondes that they shoot through here to collect data about the storm.
It has a parachute on it, and as it drops through the storm, it collects a bunch of data, and it allows them to draw a vertical map of the storm.
If we've had a couple of atmospheric rivers that aren't really producing a lot of rain, then they try to conserve more water in certain areas. But if it is going to be a very heavy rainfall event, then maybe they might be talking about releasing water.
All of this data collected from the flights are sent back to weather centers to compile and compare, ultimately improving storm predictability and forecasting.
In a warming climate, we're seeing that variability is becoming even more so. And California is becoming even more dependent on these atmospheric rivers to provide the water necessary for agriculture and drinking and other uses across the state.
We certainly had some cool weather as we've gone throughout the month of February, but heading into the last stretch,
we'll notice a big change in the numbers as we warm things up. In fact, that begins as we head into the weekend. Winds actually dying down. Offshore flow continues for us, and it stays warm right through the middle of the upcoming week. In fact, our numbers in some spots throughout the deserts 10 to 15 degrees above historical average, maybe even a little bit more in a few spots. So it's going to be feeling hot, honestly, as we get into the middle of next week in spots. San Diego, our low tonight, 50 degrees. As you work towards Oceanside, there we're in the mid-40s. Mount Laguna coming down to 35 for your low. As we transition through your Saturday, you'll note here a warming trend across so much of the southwest as we keep a very dry air mass in place. All the action will be across the northwest as we look through Saturday into Sunday with some very soaking rain there. So we're really going to miss out on anything going on, which is why we keep that offshore flow 72 for the high. We notice a couple clouds, places like Chula Vista making it into the lower 70s. And as you head towards Borrego Springs, mid 80s. But there's more to come going through the upcoming days. Check out the coast. The numbers here going up into the mid 70s by the time we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. Still keeping things comfortable, but very dry, very bright as we move through the week to come. In the inland communities, we're actually climbing right back into the mid 80s by the time we head into Wednesday. It's still pretty warm actually even for Sunday as we hold on to the 80s here. It's just a trend throughout the week. Mountain communities, our upward trend really takes off into Tuesday and Wednesday, mid 50s going into the mid 60s by the time we get into the middle of the upcoming work week. So very warm. That warmth will come to an end for the later part of the week with more onshore flow kicking in. But for desert communities, we should venture near or into the lower 90s on Wednesday. We'll be pretty close to that for Tuesday with high in the upper 80s. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, the potential impact of the president's plan to take control of the U.S. Postal Service. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A litter of pugs rescued from a dumpster in Lemon Grove went up for adoption today at the Helen Woodward Animal Center. Animal Center officials say 8 pugs were discovered in mid-December. Sadly, one of the puppies died. Anyone interested in adopting the rescued pugs was invited to visit the facility in Rancho Santa Fe. There was a line outside the door this morning, and as of this afternoon, all but one of those precious little angels have found forever homes. That's great. We're more than halfway through Museum Month, and there are dozens of amazing places to visit across San Diego County. I recently visited one out-of-the-way place in Carlsbad that gives a huge platform to very small things. Tucked in among a business park in the eastern stretches of Carlsbad is the Miniature Engineering Craftsmanship Museum.
We're not really an educational institution, but one of our missions is to educate.
As general manager and curator of the museum, Terry Miller and his docents do a lot of educating. Education delivered through observing and interacting with a mixture of models, machines, motors, mechanics, and more, all in miniature. Miller gave us a tour of the place. It was a jaw-dropping experience.
Over here we have a high-speed, straight-line electric radio control car. Top speed on this radio control car is 172 miles an hour.
From the creation of something so small that can go so fast, we move on to one of the museum's premier pieces. Miller calls it model making on steroids.
This is a 1932 Duesenberg. It has a running 8-cylinder engine. All the major components you'd find in the original Duesenberg are here and working. It took 20,000 hours to finish this automobile. Now that's basically 10 years, 8 to 5 days a week.
Oh my gosh. Next, we're on to little buildings, doll houses. But before those, a stop at the museum's biggest model building, the U.S. Capitol.
It's got a complete sound system in it. It's got this video display on the back that has a lot of different images, including fireworks from the 4th of July.
Now to the doll houses and the astonishing level of detail, not only of the houses, but everything inside them.
It's primarily fine woodworking and architectural models, a little closer to the crafty type work, but all meticulously done.
Little everything. People, furniture, rugs, appliances, and whimsical touches like cats in various states of play and repose, and music boxes, the kind where the music takes a back seat to the box.
And each one plays a different tune. We've got, so we got his Harley, we got the Toy Factory, the Calliope, all kinds of different themes going on here.
There's the Cyclone Racer, a roller coaster that used to exist on the coast of Long Beach. It proclaimed itself as the world's greatest ride.
My goal is to wow every visitor that comes in.
It's not hard. Concerned about the price of eggs? You need your own Cockadoodle Egg Company. There are a lot of remarkable things about this museum, and one of the most remarkable things is that well north of 90% of the stuff in here actually works, like these steam engines. Sometimes they need a little encouragement, and this steam whistle. That is one of the many reasons why people like Thomas Bruyette volunteer here as a docent.
I came in here the first time, and it reminded me of my childhood when I used to make things of my own.
That sense of childlike wonder envelops you here. It's woven through every display in this remarkable place, a place where imagination sparks creativity that combines with skill and a whole lot of patience to make amazing things in miniature. That museum is one of more than 70 where you can get half off during Museum Month. Passes are available at libraries throughout the county and at San Diego MuseumCouncil.org. And if you've ever believed anything I've told you on KPBS, go see that museum. It's astonishing. Thank you for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have an excellent evening and a wonderful weekend.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.